right, we are getting into a Best Ball Mania 5 live draft here. With me today, I've got Coach Retzloff of Best Ball Study Hall. How are you today?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me here today. It's very exciting. We're here on the month of August, and these drafts, the casuals are showing up, but we have a bigger crowd. So it's really fun. It'll be interesting to see what we have. You and I competing side by side in this Best Ball Mania draft. Who fills in? Is it red badges? Is it black badges? Is it people who are drafting all the time? Or is it people logging on for the first time? I know you and I have been drafting ever since contests ripped from early spring, early winter, or late winter. So it's exciting.
For sure. Looks like we got loaded in. We got about 30 seconds till it gets going. I'm in the 4 spot, and it looks like you're going to be in the 9 slot. So we're a little bit
Beautiful.
not right back to back, which is helpful for talking.
Oh, absolutely. I had one with Scott Connor and Ed DeLauder from Best Ball Night School, and Scott was 1, I was 5, and Ed was 12. It was the perfect, like the way we chopped it up. So I like what you said. How you're 4, I'm 9. We'll be picking every couple picks actually.
Yeah, I haven't gotten to draft from the 4 slot in a while. I'm about 22 drafts deep in BBM5, and I have not gotten the 2 spot once. So I'm lacking on my CD Lamb exposure. I'm hoping, praying that he falls to 4, knowing that it's not going to happen. But the
I
guy can
know.
dream.
You sure can, and maybe he could sometimes fall to 3 with people going crazy about Tyreek Hill. Now, I've been somebody who's
There he
crazy enough
goes.
where I'll go and take, like, AJ Brown or somebody different to yank the steering wheel, but I'm in the draft and I'm picking 9, so it's like you said, it's not happening.
Yeah. All right. So we got an auto draft Tyreek there. I'm thinking I'm going to go Justin Jefferson. I've had a lot of Jamar Chase lately, and I only have 5% Jefferson, so it's a pretty easy one for me there.
Nice pick, nice click, and he's Justin Jefferson just doing well in training camp. You know, he's above the fray. He's still going to get his. It's just a matter of how efficient will the quarterback play be in getting quality targets. I recall a throwback. Remember Tom Brady after their perfect season with Randy Moss? It was, I think, Matt Castle was the quarterback who replaced Tom Brady after the injury in 2008. Oh, I'm on the clock. Oh, let's go. AJ Brown. This is easy, simple, nice.
Very
Been trying
nice.
to get my numbers up there. The quality of target they would talk about on Randy Moss, even the throws that Castle would have were nowhere near Tom Brady. So we'll see. And granted, it's not an apt comparison because you have Kirk Cousins to Tom Brady, but Kirk Cousins to the drop off of McCarthy and or Darnold. It'll be interesting to see there.
Yeah, I might look at taking some Darnold here. I'm not sure how I want to play my QBs in this draft quite yet. I was listening to Scott's Underdog Portfolio Weekly from last week,
Mhm.
where they were talking about taking Kyron late in drafts, or like Sony Michel a few years back. So I'm looking at probably pushing running backs and just having a high volume of them, rather than having the high quality ones at the beginning. But that does mean I have to focus in receivers. It looks like you're on the clock.
All right. And are you considering one of those 2862 type of builds? I know we've talked about funky builds before. I'm actually going to go with Devon Achan, do something crazy.
Oh, like it. Yeah, I am thinking about that type of build. Probably, I want to even push it to 4 or 5 wide receivers. We'll see where we're at. But I really do think leaning into it is where it starts to pay off. I think if you're gonna do it, just really commit to it.
Yeah, you want to lean in. And what's the farthest you've gone? Have you gone to pick 100 or further? Like, what's the furthest you've gone? I think I've gone to about pick 118 to 120.
Yeah, I think about 100 for sure. I think I got Singletary. I don't remember exactly what the draft number was, and I was hoping that Collins was going to fall to me, and he does not. Um, I'm running out of time. I'm going to take some Devontae Smith here.
Beautiful, beautiful. And that snipes me just partially, but I can still go in the direction of AJ Brown. I love AJ Brown with Jalen Hurts, but I also have to consider, do I want to veer off of every time I get AJ Brown, I go and get Jalen Hurts? So a
Right.
peculiar layer. Actually, speaking of Scott Connor's last Underdog Portfolio Weekly, I was listening to it today, and Scott was talking about some kind of iteration of who he had stacked with a player, and he thought about maybe I should do a different ripple where I don't stack the quarterback with that player. So I'm going to have that decision probably right around pick 40 because I'll be 33 and 40 for my next two picks.
Right. And as I'm thinking about this, I'm kind of regretting that click. I think I should have gone Olave because what I really like to do with this build is not have the wide receivers correlate with each other, but have them have a game in common. So like Justin Jefferson and Olave both have Green Bay, so I could go and get like a Marshawn Lloyd later in the draft. So I may come to regret that, but we'll see where we end up.
That's actually a really good point. Where there's commonalities. A commonality that I like as well is the Week 16 Eagles and Commanders matchup. So I need to be interested in possibly some Commanders on my squad.
I just took a late Brandon Ayuk. Got some nice ADP value to kind of make up for my Devontae Smith reach. And right now, the way I want to build this room, I don't actually want that much correlation between my wide receivers. I want to bring it back with my running backs where, I've got these backup or like 1B type running backs filling out most of my room, but they are correlated against my stud wide receivers that are for sure going to hit my lineup.
And what's the thinking behind that?
Just that the if your wide receivers aren't as correlated, oh, you're on the clock here.
It's all right. I was hoping Malik Neighbors was falling. He fell to pick 30,
I
and I
almost
would have
took him.
loved that. Oh my god, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, the biggest thinking behind that is the less correlated the less clustered your wide receivers are, the more options you're going to have for that running back bring back stacks. Because I think that with those running backs, you want to have correlation, and I hesitate to be too focused in on a couple games, especially when you go the Minnesota route, where like Minnesota, Chicago, and Seattle have like a trio in the
Yes.
playoff weeks.
Yes.
I think that you got to be careful not to get maybe overexposed to those games.
And just a pattern, and this is kind of a DFS element where you go for the running back, and then maybe you get the player who could be the slot receiver on the bring back for the other team. One team's going to get ahead, and then the other team is going to pass a lot. So I like what you're talking about as far as that sort of a correlation.
And the game script for sure, because you want to have wide receivers against running backs. I mean, wide receivers against wide receivers works really well if it's a shootout, but often enough, there's one team that's going to take an early lead and hold it.
And there's going to be different pockets between the two offenses. There's going to be different pockets of the play. Oh, there goes. Did he go? Okay, perfect. Jalen Hurts is there for me. I'm going to take him. It's there. So right now I've got AJ Brown and Jalen Hurts. There's going to be a different attack style between two teams. The element of the run game you're going to have in a matchup. So part of what your build is, like right now, I'll read off your team: Justin Jefferson, Devonta Smith, Brandon Ayuk. If you were to go the Green Bay route, one route you may be able to go part of that would be maybe it's Marshawn Lloyd off of Jefferson, or maybe you get a little bit of Ty Chandler, and then it's maybe some Romeo Dubs. Just those mixtures and iterations. I like the mirroring element that you're talking about there.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna do a little bit of an ADP reach here, not huge, where I am 0% Terry McLaurin so far. It's just been a big miss for me.
Oh yeah,
and it correlates nicely with my Devontae Smith.
Well, not that I was going to get him to fall back to me, but I love me some Terry McLaurin. I feel like Jaden Daniels and Terry McLaurin will be the nut stack in fantasy football. Granted, you have this Brandon Ayuk overhang of could he go to the Commanders, but it's fiction until it's reality, right? And I really love Terry McLaurin. Something that sticks with me to your pick with Terry McLaurin as you've gone 4 wide to start. Terry McLaurin, that Jacoby Brissett game where he came in against the Rams last year lives rent free in my head. There's like 2 or 3 bombs that went to Terry McLaurin that I just thought, man, Terry McLaurin with a real quality quarterback would be unstoppable. And we've just been unfortunate every single year just to not have things click quite right for Terry McLaurin. And you really just, if you bet on health, I love the game that Jaden Daniels has. So Terry McLaurin, I like your pick there, especially in the 4th round.
Yeah.
So what are
right.
you thinking of coming up?
So I'm thinking tight end next, and if McBride is there, I'm gonna smash some McBride. I think, just especially past ADP. I was thinking that McBride might not fall to me, and if that were the case, I was gonna go for Kincaid and do a little bit of a Detroit bring back, looking at either Montgomery as maybe my first running back down the road,
Yes.
or maybe even pushing it further and grabbing some Craig Reynolds as a nice little low percent of the market being taken there.
In that game, I like that. And then you also have the element of with that San Fran and Lions game, if you go 0 running back up to David Montgomery, because I've done it, it is very fun, the team that you have. And you can tell yourself a great story in the event you get David Montgomery, because David Montgomery would easily be a top 12 running back with an absence of Jahmyr Gibbs. We don't like to think of those top 2 round running backs as getting hurt, but it could absolutely happen. So you could tell yourself that good story. So here I'm on the clock. Rich just went. At this pocket of the draft, I already have Achane as my anchor. Quarterback is set. I'm going to keep pushing wide receiver here, and I am just going to take Rashee Rice. Now, Rashee Rice, I don't think he's going to get suspended, and his ADP pre-NFL draft was at the 2-3 turn, or sorry, prior to Easter, because it was Easter weekend, which was just before the draft. Rashee Rice was going about the 2-3 turn. I remember 24-25. It would be that double tap there at the 2-3 turn. And now Rashee Rice has fallen. He's fallen significantly beyond here, but I still love this click, especially with, I know I have a differentiated rostership so far of A.J. Brown and Devon Achane. I really tried to do something different from the 9 hole. What do you think of this team at the 12 hole? How would you break them down?
12. Let me look at them. So they've got a nice little 1-0-1-4-1 going. Trying to see if there's even much correlation. There's really not as of yet. There you got Buffalo, New York there. I hate that it does that to me. Just kicks you out. Let you make your pick.
All right, so here I'm between Deontay and Rome. I've been trying to get my Deontay numbers up, but as I have DJ Moore, I like the out opportunity for Rome Odunze and DJ Moore. I really like this offense that the Bears have. So give me DJ Moore, who just got the fat contract, Rome Odunze, and I'm setting up possibly for Caleb. If not, I still have a very good player there. And like you said, what's that combination? Seattle are some pieces that I can go towards
Seattle,
if I want.
Chicago, Minnesota. Yeah,
that's right. Okay. So maybe that's veering a little bit into some of your deeper, not quite your direct build, but maybe we're both kind of in these minor branches of the tree in our builds where we could be crossing over just a little bit.
Yeah, maybe a little bit. Trying to decide where I'm going next. Where I already have, I have Kyler queued up. I'm probably going to take my Montgomery here, and I'll take Kyler on the bring back. Obviously, Kyler, a high priority target for me with having McBride there.
Yep. And that quarterback tight end correlation, it's so strong when it hits. So, and I really love Kyler Murray to be a top 5 quarterback this year. And the McBride mates are going to be excited for him. I love Trey McBride. I made a big case for Trey McBride on Player Profiler News Primetime for him to be the number 1 tight end to take the crown from Travis Kelce. And of course, we have to respect Sam Laporta. Oh man, there goes JSN. That's tough to see. You would have loved to have some of him. I would have loved to have had him.
Yeah, as of right now, I may not take another wide receiver, but we'll see. I think one of the strengths of this build, when you lead off with four receivers, is you really don't feel the need to go and get more, especially when they have all different buys like mine do, because you're only ever going to be without one of them. So theoretically, all three of them could hit your lineup unless you have a running back have a spike week or even a second tight end. But we'll see what falls to me. I've one thing that doesn't work particularly well with this build, but I've been trying to click on some Josh Reynolds. I think he's criminally undervalued. I think he may be the wide receiver 2 in Denver, which is maybe just my love of him as a Lions fan coming out. But I think that he's probably the second most talented one in that room. I'm going to go ahead and take Kyler here.
Oh, beautiful. And I like the way you groove that. You got your first running back in David Montgomery. Now you have that instant correlated stack between Kyler and Trey McBride. And then you have such upside with the potential of David Montgomery. Now, where you've gone, David Montgomery, do you think you're going to push running back even more? Or do you feel comfortable starting to get your second and third running back, maybe in the 9, 10, 11 round range?
Yeah, it's a good question. A lot of times with this build, the one thing I do find myself doing is I end up with a bully QB or a bully tight end room, which is not the most efficient thing because I'm so religious about pushing that running back down the board and trying to get some of the more crusty ones. I think I have to be more willing to take some of the ones in the upper tiers. I'm so addicted to I want to own these lesser owned guys that aren't gonna that are going to make my draft one of one.
So now I'm in this slight conundrum where it's Ferguson or Brian Thomas Jr. I like my four receivers. I like the bet that I have. I'm actually going to go with some Jake Ferguson. And it's possible that Dak Prescott could fall back to me. I could also chase some Commanders. Normally, I would go Brian Robinson Jr. I doubt he'll come back to me. He's right at the top of the queue. But in other drafts, I've gotten plenty, so I don't feel like I'm missing out so much on Brian Thomas Jr.
I will say that if he happens to fall back to me, which is unlikely, I might click on some Jordan Addison with he's at such a value right now, and I have 0% ownership of him. So
and that goes with your bill too.
Correct. It goes with that Justin Jefferson, and then maybe I can go and grab a Sam Darnold as a unique build. I don't know how many people have a Kyler Darnold build.
And that's the other thing you're trying to splice off. You can get these unique ripples of the Vikings Green Bay build, but are you selecting the correct quarterback?
Right.
There goes Jordan Addison. Topical. They must have heard us, right?
Clearly.
So I am going to go with Dak Prescott. I know all the rage is people will talk about, oh, don't get two quarterbacks from the same week 17 game. Well, how about them getting through week 15, week 16 together to get to that final game? I really don't mind the idea of this being an electric game, the game you want. And could it be flawed thinking? Sure. But with all the iterations and ripples that can be out there, I love the idea of what I just pulled off, just like a backdoor, not backdoor, but just like a flip and reverse mirror, cheaper version, of course, of the Lamar Mandrew stack, which so many people will have right at like the wraparound where they'll have to pick one and see if they can get the other. Right there, I went out and fetched Ferguson and Dak. I reached just a little bit. Now you have a decision. It looks like you went with DeAndre Swift. So what went into DeAndre Swift with your build as your second running back now?
So I've got Montgomery and I've got Jefferson. So I've got some good correlation there. And I only have one or two shares of Swift across my portfolio. So it just made a lot of sense to me there at that pick. And it was right. The ADP price was correct. I wasn't taking a huge reach on him either.
It is kind of funny because I have two Bears receivers, but in this draft room, you have an angle of the Bears running back room. And then I have Hurts and AJ Brown. You have Devonta Smith. So it's neat. The legs and the roots of the teams that we're building are not directly tied together, but they're kind of running in these parallel universes.
That's for sure.
Now you've gone 4 receivers to start. Do you have any inclination feeling like you need to edge up to 5 or 6 between round 9 and 10? Or are you just content with, I mean, you've got very good wide receivers for your 4.
Right. At the moment, I'm pretty content to sit there. I may go and grab a fifth flyer,
Mhm.
but I don't. I feel no pressure to make that happen right now. Maybe just build up the
Mhm.
core of my running back room.
And then I think another thing to what we're talking about is you've got the pocket of the draft where you're at. You might have built a certain way, but the pocket of the draft, what's at the top of the ADP board and what it presents, you might have to, it almost sometimes makes your decision for you.
Right.
Oh, Jane Daniels just went. Let's see, did they get anybody with him? I guess
Yeah.
they might go for some backdoor Dotson and McCaffrey.
So I'm taking a huge reach there on Chase Brown. He
Mm.
won't. He shouldn't come back to me.
And he wouldn't. I would have taken him.
Yeah, and I
For
feel
that.
very strongly that that's going to be a player that's going to matriculate up in ADP value. So I
Yep.
feel pretty comfortable taking him that far ahead of ADP.
Man, I like that. I like that. Oh, I see somebody at the top of the board. This is tough. Oh, Brian Robinson just went ahead of me. That's tough. Yep.
That's
I
brutal.
really, really would have loved to have gotten him because he would have been a piece of that Commanders offense to go against the next week's matchup off of the Eagles and the Cowboys. All right, now I'm in a conundrum of Brock Bowers, Tajay Spears. Brock Bowers has fallen up to this point, and I'm going to click on Brock Bowers. It looks like I'm almost 10 picks past ADP, 105 from the ADP of 96.6. So I like what I did getting him. I am set and forget at my tight end room. I'm feeling inclined towards that. I'm set and forget at my quarterback room. And now I'm pushing running back. And I have an idea of a fifth wide receiver that I may want. If my fifth wide receiver doesn't hit, then I'll just go and retrieve towards the running back position. Basically, what the room gives me, as we were saying.
Now, are you targeting Brandon Cooks with that room that you have built out?
Yes, you're a brilliant man because he's the guy, and I could go. I was actually looking at Dontavian Wicks as well, and there's Romeo Doubs. If Romeo Doubs falls to me, I think I've got to take him over Brandon Cooks and not get greedy. Sometimes we don't take the value that's in front of us when it's fallen on the board. So I'm one pick away. Oh, this person went Wicks and Marshawn Lloyd. Oh, they went Romeo Doubs just in front of me. That's fine. All right, now
That's
I have a
always frustrating.
decision. You know what? I actually I like this guy more, and he's not going to fall to me. Going to go with Jerry Judy.
Very Judy.
And subtly, sneakily, he goes off of Devon Achane for me.
Sure.
I know I won't have to go towards getting Deshaun Watson because I'm set at my quarterback position. But with Jerry Judy, that offers just some different to what we were talking about, right? Receiver, running back, the way you attack some of these stacks. There I have some rush game of the Dolphins, alternating the pass game. Hopefully, Achane helps get them up for the Dolphins. And then Deshaun Watson has to chase back with some Jerry Judy. Now, what's your thinking right now? You have Montgomery, Swift, Chase. You got Kyler stacked with McBride, and you have 4 stud wide receivers.
Yeah, I'm starting to wonder if I might have to take one more wide receiver because I am ending up with quite a pretty decent running back room here. I am on the clock. I think I'm just not going to overcomplicate this and take the ADP value of Devin Singletary. May not be my favorite player, but it's hard to pass up a starting running back. 8 past ADP. I've got TJ Hawkinson starred in my queue here. I was thinking about taking one of the Packers receivers if they fell back to me. Romeo Dobbs, especially, was something that looked very interesting to me, particularly with the fact that I don't have any of him in my portfolio as of yet.
And Romeo Dobbs is catching a lot more buzz. And pick a Packers receiver, they all seem to get some buzz. But lately, Romeo Dobbs seems like there's a little traction there. Funny enough, though, Dontavian Wicks flipped Romeo Dobbs in this Best Ball Mania draft. 107 for Dontavian Wicks and 111 here with Romeo Dobbs. Here's a question for you. Brandon Cooks had fallen just to the pick ahead of you. If Brandon Cooks were on the board, would you have been tempted at all to take him, or do you think he's washed outside of being tied to Dak Prescott?
I would have been tempted going against my Smith, but I'm not entirely sure if I would have. I tell you what, this 124 pick, I will strongly be considering Zeke Elliott going against Devontae Smith.
And it's funny, you were talking about you may not want to build this team to be receiver battling receiver. And you had that exercise of, okay, do I go Brandon Cooks with my Devonta Smith? But now, like you said, there's different attack points of that game, the rushing game for the Cowboys with Zeke, and then the receiving game for the passing game for Devonta Smith. So it'll be neat if Zeke falls to you. And I understand your temptation there because in a vacuum, and I, like you, like me, I like Gus Edwards, Blake Corum better. You might have differing opinions, but I feel like in a vacuum, there's other running backs in this tier that you might like better than Zeke. But based on your build, it sounds like you're leaning into some Zeke. Does that make sense? Do you agree with that?
And I thought about some Gus Edwards there because, like I was saying earlier, I was thinking about bringing back some, Josh Reynolds as maybe my last receiver towards the end of the draft. Because I already have Chase Brown that has the Denver game, and so having a Charger would make some sense. I ended up deciding not to go that direction just because I'm still unsure. I think I may change gears here slightly because what I often do in this build, let you make your pick here. What I often do in this build is go 2 QBs, 2 tight ends early and really push running backs down the board. But I've ended up with 5 running backs already through the 120s, which is much earlier than I wanted to do it. But the reason I did it was because I want to take TJ Hawkinson to pair with Justin Jefferson and Sam Darnold to pair with the 2 of them. So that kind of flips the strategy a bit because obviously you're not taking either of those 2 earlier than the last few rounds.
It made room, right? Because you eliminate having to, that's one less quarterback, correct? That's one less tight end.
Right.
That you're up in that clump that frees up that spot. Is that your thinking?
Right. And I think had I maybe come to that realization quicker, and this is where the downside of a fast draft versus a slow draft, I think if I had time to think it through, I probably would have hammered a 5th receiver in those first 6 rounds. Yep. Just to get that value rather than having this gluttony of running backs already. So I don't know that I will, but I may abandon the strategy I came in with and start grabbing some more wide receivers. But the balance of that will be, it'll probably end up, instead of your classic 2, 5, 9, 2, all right, maybe I end up more in a 7 and 7.
Oh man, the 2772 build is so aesthetically pleasing. I don't know what it is. Once your team posts, and if you love your onesie position, your 2s and 2s, the way the 7s and 7s, especially if you like your first 5 wide receivers, those can be some really beautiful teams. I just want to talk about a not really a conundrum, but it's a predicament, right? I have Jacoby Myers, unless there's some news out there I don't know about. Jacoby Myers fell from 119 to pick 136. He was just staring me there in the face. For my team, my build, because I've gone with the 2 quarterbacks and the 2 tight ends, what I deem relatively early in the first 10 rounds, I am having to find and mine value at the receiver position. And I'm sitting here thinking like, man, 6 wide receiver for Jacoby Myers and best ball, sign me all the way up. I was between Josh Downs. Josh Downs was tempting. I've been all about Josh Downs being mispriced. Again, why is AD Mitchell, especially in this draft, going 1 round ahead, even though AD Mitchell is on the same team of this person who has AD Mitchell and Josh Downs? Um, it's just a predicament I had. And then another thing entering my mind was Jahan Dotson to go off of the Philly Dallas build, Philly playing Commanders week 16. Now it looks like you went and got TJ Hawkinson. How do you feel?
I feel pretty good. I thought about waiting for him to come back, and I decided it wasn't worth the risk
Yes.
of him not being there. So I ended up deciding to grab him just a couple picks ahead of ADP. But I really like, especially no one's targeting Darnold in these drafts.
Nope.
So I think that I will be safe to take him probably as my last pick and have both of my QBs correlated with both of my tight ends.
And with Darnold and McCarthy, one gets taken, you can definitely get the other one, because who's going to build with one of the Vikings quarterbacks? Somebody who has those weapons. So there definitely won't be a second person out there. So then that might be more of a custodial build, but it's there and offered and availed if you need it, especially late. You can find out late and you can get late. Now, question for you again. Are you set and forget at tight end with Trey McBride and TJ Hawkinson?
I definitely am. I'll talk about it more after I take this pick. I'm going to grab Algier here. He's got
nice
correlation against my Singletary and against my McLaurin.
And your your Commanders. Yep.
Yes, yep. But yeah, so I mean, the reason you draft Trey McBride is to be your tight end one, to be in that spot as often as possible. So, and with him having a week 11 bye, I have no concern that that I'm going to need TJ Hawkinson to rush back, or that I need to have another one to cover McBride's bye or anything like that.
And I like what you said about TJ Hawkinson at 141, not wanting to push it. Now that there's more casual people out here drafting, what you might be able to lay the trap for to dip another round or a set of maybe half a round of picks isn't always there. So sometimes you do need to snipe and get who you need. Oh, that hurts, man. Somebody went and took Chuba Hubbard 2 picks before me. I'm sad about that. I would have loved to have gotten him. And that opens up actually a conundrum where I have I was thinking, okay, here I am. I'm on the clock. I'm just going to do it. And I'm going to have to solve some equation for my running back room, because I'm going to go with Jalen Wright. I have 3 running backs who have a week 6 bye. So I will have to probably go with 6 running backs to this build. So it might be a 2-6-8-2 build, which I'm fine with. Or it might line up with what you're talking about with a 2-7-7-2 build. How do you feel about dual running backs, this stat cuff concept where you have 2 running backs from a backfield in your drafts? Have you been doing it, and what's your thoughts on it?
I've done it some. It really depends on the backfield. If it's a 1A, 1B situation that I feel fairly comfortable with, then I have no problems doing it. I think where it starts to lose its value is if you've got, let's say that there's a running back that you're not entirely sure about. If maybe the Dobbins, if you have Gus Edwards, but you're not sure if Dobbins is going to come back, and you draft Dobbins because you're not sure which one of them is going to get, the lead role, which it should be Gus Edwards, right? But obviously we've seen in the past Dobbins be electric, and if he comes back healthy, maybe it is his backfield. I think hedging isn't necessarily your best bet, but if you got a 1A, 1B situation, I think it's often worth it.
So I go there and get Jaleel McLaughlin. He has a week 14 bye. I need a guy who's just going to play early in the season. Did you just see Brendan Rice go in round 14?
I sure did.
Am I crazy? That's a name out of place, right?
Yeah, it most certainly is. Yeah.
Okay.
At some point, I don't mind taking your guys, even ADP be damned, but I think that's a little bit premature there.
Yeah, maybe in those last 3, maybe 4 rounds, you can throw out some ADP, but I'm sitting here like, "Wait a second, what year am I in? What round am I in? And which Rice are we talking about?" Because it's certainly not Rashi Rice.
Or
Yeah.
Jerry.
Get eat him too. Jerry's probably better, right?
Right, right. I'm gonna take some Antonio Gibson here.
Mhm.
He's got
Cool.
some playoff correlation against my Arizona. I have been of the opinion that Week 15 should be, especially if you're not drafting a full portfolio. Like, there's no way I get to 150 teams. If you're not drafting a full portfolio, I think there's something to be said for making sure as many of your teams do well in the first week of the playoffs as possible to try
Mhm.
and recoup some of your value so you can come back with more of a bankroll the following year.
And that's actually an interesting point that you make, because there's plenty of people who, in a 150 max, will have 20 stabs, and that's their bulk entry that they can afford, that they like to do. And it's almost like the concept of what you would do with a certain amount of income in life. When you go out into society, how would you attack with the resources that you have? I actually like what you say there. It just gives a mindset into the psychology of how somebody might think who doesn't have the entire portfolio within a tournament setting, right? In one whole tournament.
Yeah. So I've got 4 picks left. And so I am going to start taking some huge ADP swings. So bear with me with none of these are going to look good ADP wise. But so my last 4 picks, I'm planning on them being one last wide receiver swing, Sam
Yep.
Darnold, which I just took, and 2 more running back swings that are getting some buzz that may matriculate up in the value. So we'll see how it shakes out. What are your thoughts on Deneric Prince being all the way up
Yes.
at 208?
Uh, let's see. I'll make this pick. Ray
Yeah.
Davis just fell. He's crazy. 164 ADP, and I'm getting him at 177. So over 10 points or to 10 picks ADP. I got a different running back than Jaleel McLaughlin as far as team wise. It's a different team. I've got imprinted 2 running backs who won't have that week 6 bye. What was that question you just asked?
What do you think about
Oh,
Deneric Prince being all the way up at 208?
eh, the Chiefs might already know what they have in CEH, so they're fine to try and push to see what Deneric Prince is. I wouldn't put the most stock into it, but at that price, why not? Why not go and enter in and take a few stabs with the palette that we have in these last 3 rounds for running back? Why not expand the accordion out to have as many selections and outs as you possibly can? That's just my thought on that. What do you think of
For
that?
sure. Yeah, I tend to agree. I think I need to get out of the habit of being such a slave to ADP in the last honestly 4 to 5 rounds because those players are not going to be as impactful as you think. So real quick, some running backs I've been looking at recently that have been collecting some value and that I'm a little bit higher on. Jarrett Patterson's been getting some good buzz. I'm a big fan of Justice Hill being able to take over if there was a Derrick Henry injury. Amari DeMarcado maybe over Trey Benson. Samaje Perine is always just a good pick, I feel. And Cam
Mhm.
Akers, I think I'm going to eliminate Cam Akers just based on the fact I don't have any Houston correlation, but it is someone I'm eyeing in future drafts.
Have you drafted any Jawar Jordan?
I have not.
Okay. I just took maybe a smattering couple of picks here. Now, what are you thinking of? You were talking about taking a big swing right around this pick. Is that player still out
Yeah.
there for you?
Yeah, and I'm trying to decide between probably Patterson and Pirine. I'm going to take some Patterson just because I already have some Pirine. So Patterson's been getting some training camp buzz,
Yep.
and that running back room is so out there. So
Yes.
who knows what the Chargers are doing?
Well,
So
I was talking to Ed on Best Ball Night School. We were talking about if Kamani Vidal just shows any sign of life in the preseason, he'll probably go up, right?
yeah,
2 rounds, and people will just they won't be able to. They can't help themselves now, and they won't be able to help themselves then. Would you have been interested in Khalil Herbert falling to you at 196?
not with Swift. I don't think that's kind of that situation where I think you gotta trust that Swift is the guy. That's kind of what I was talking about earlier. In a different room where I hadn't taken Swift, I think I would be, but and like I said, I'm trying to make the end of this draft as unique as possible. Which I mean, I don't think anyone's going to deny that.
No,
Uh,
you're actually making a good point where you said you got differentiation with Darnold and then Jarrett Patterson. The Darnold Jarrett Patterson might be what you need in 2024 in Best Ball Mania 5.
maybe. So I'm deciding between Justice Hill, DeMarcado, and P Ryan. I'm going to take DeMarcado. Maybe he catches some passes from Kyler Murray, and I get a little bit of value there. I don't think I'm going to take
And
DeMarcado in any other draft. So
you make a good point because Scott on Underdog Portfolio Weekly, Scott Connor was talking about how you want to make these picks where a majority of the field, if you can get 80 or 90% of the field that isn't taking the player that you like, and then you can get even sub that, you're just so excited. And he cited Andre Yoshivas. And if you've got a player though that cuts down against the field, but it allows for your advantage to take out. So look, man, you got Amari DeMercado. What do you think the percent of drafters that have taken Amari DeMercado is in Best Ball Mania, if you had to guess?
not a lot. I'd say probably 0.001.
Sub one, right? Yeah,
Yeah,
sub
for
one.
sure.
Oh, Javon Baker, good pick. Not bad at all. Um, you know what? Speaking of, um, yeah, I want to take him. I will take Andre Yoshivas, topical as we said it. I
For sure.
debated right there if I let him go to the wraparound pick, but the running back. Actually, I have a couple running backs I can go towards, so I'm not really pressed. I'm actually in a good place now. I'm ready to full up the table as far as I can run out the rest of this with one more pick left here in round 18. I'm happy with the outs I have at running back. What are you thinking of going into round 18 here to put a bow on your team?
So I am going to go one last receiver. I mean I'm going to go with my guy that is, I mean, assuming he doesn't get taken. I am convicted on Josh Reynolds. I'm trying to take him as my last pick in a lot of different drafts if I have even the slightest reason to.
Yes.
And I do have both Antonio Gibson and Jarrett Peterson. So I've got some week 15 and 16 correlation with him. So I'm pretty content to take him in this draft. That's enough of a reason for me to take him in my opinion.
Oh, yes, sweet. I am super hyped. So between what I've got here, I was between Roshan, thinking about Roshan to go with my DJ Moore Roma Dunze, just even though I didn't stack with Caleb Williams and get the Bear share. But there I have, oh, Bear share. I think that was like an old 90s downloading site. Uh, Will Shipley here. I put a bow on it because I have the Philly Dallas. This is a unique iteration. Granted, Will Shipley's going to be drafted way more than, say, who you have in Amari DiMercado, right?
Right.
But I like Will Shipley as a different wrinkle with AJ Brown, Hurts, and then the Dak Ferguson Shipley. Those will be my core 5 players to that Week 17 matchup. And then, of course, I have some opportunity with Luke McCaffrey to that Week 16 correlation that I liked. Question: did you ever consider Luke McCaffrey in your build tonight?
I didn't consider it, but it's certainly not a bad pick. And actually, that's not true. I did consider it briefly, but it was after Jaden Daniels had already gone off the board. the biggest
Mhm.
appeal to me to taking two players from the same receiving core is if I'm going to take their QB. Not that I don't do it
Gotcha.
otherwise, but
Yeah.
a lot of times if I'm gonna invest that heavily in the receiving game, I want to try and have the quarterback as well.
What's your feeling on, let's say you get Jordan Love, or sorry, let's say it's Darnold with Justin Jefferson, but then on the other side, you get two of those Packers four receivers, and maybe it's Reed and Dubs or Dubs and Wicks, but they don't have Love. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, that's a little bit different with you having the week 17, right? That's
Mm.
the week 17 correlation there. That then you're just hoping and praying that that is a blowout of a game. Let me see if I can get that draft board pulled up here. We
Yep.
can talk it over. Um, Refresh real quick.
It's a nice board. It's a fun one. And we had, let's see, four red badges. We had a red badge or a black badge. And then we got you. You've been drafting like crazy. How many drafts have you been doing, do you
I'm
think?
at that's up. This was my 23rd draft.
Awesome.
So yeah.
Awesome.
So as far as kind of my strategy going into this, I didn't end up getting as crusty of a running back room as I was hoping to. I did end up with kind of that same build that I ended up 2952. So kind of the inverse of your normal, more average
Yep.
build. Um, which I'm happy with the build,
Hmm.
but maybe not so much with the names. It's like it's weird to complain about having
Yeah.
too good of players, right? But
Yeah.
I do feel that when you have these particular players, you're going to end up being much more similar to other drafters,
Hmm.
which that's where the roster construction comes in, right? Because there's going to be teams that have David Montgomery as their first running back, but how many of those teams also have 9 running backs, right?
Yes. And what you're doing, like this takes just a wildness, a gumption. You got to have guts, right? 2952 build. You kind of have the makings of a custodial build because essentially you've got Kyler, and the
Right,
appeal to a custodial build that we've talked about before is you want an elite tight end, right? So your elite tight end is paired too. It's even better if it's paired with that quarterback. So you've got the elite. You should be filling out top 12 easily, but a lot of top 5 weeks are going to be made up of, especially with the bet. We're telling the story of your this team going, right? Kyler and McBride are going to be filling that lineup like crazy. Your
right.
top 4 receivers, Jefferson, Smith, Ayuk, McLaurin, they're going to have their seasons like what I was talking about earlier with Terry McLaurin and Jaden Daniels being the nut stack. Terry McLaurin really has to be that money zone wide receiver for you this year, which again, you're
Right.
making those bets, but you buy time with Sam Darnold, whether he gets the entire season, is Kyler Murray carrying the weight the entire season. You're going to have opportunity possibly if Sam Darnold outplays his ADP. And then we talked about the time length of TJ Hawkinson being out. That week 6 bye, I really think week 7 we could see TJ Hawkinson. And then I think the math off the top of my head is like 11 usable games. And you're talking about tight end 16, TJ Hawkinson,
Right.
who even with a lesser quarter, he would be top 3 with Kirk Cousins, right? Maybe even top 2 consideration, no injury, right? So
And
then with health,
even back with Goff and
yep,
Stafford, he was always a dominant. So if either of those Vikings QBs are a shadow of any
yep.
of those three QBs, then Hawkinson's going to be just fine and may even hit your flex.
And then and man, you are a Lions fan because you just had that pullback so quickly with your like, yeah, man, with Hawkinson. Yeah, you're like, hey man, I'm not gonna let you slide by without mentioning some of his Lions share.
Oh yeah,
But really, I think he can come by and I like the story you tell about this team. The 2862 builds, the 2952 builds, that you've had have been really appealing. What? Oh, it was a 2952 build that we reviewed on the Best Ball Night School, and it's got viability. And the cool thing you did in that draft was your 5 receivers had different bye weeks, and then
Right.
in this one, your 5, you just have one commonality between McLaurin and Reynolds with week 14. So, what do you think of that?
Yeah, to be honest, before picking Reynolds, I had not looked at his buy. And frankly, with how often Reynolds theoretically should be hitting your lineup based
Yeah.
on your, like, the value of all the players in your team, it may not matter. But I mean, if if like I am, you're kind of counting on Josh Reynolds to be outperforming his ADP substantially, then that may be relevant. But I mean, that's my fourth and fifth wide receiver there with the 14 buy, and it's such a late buy as well. By then, you're
Yes.
probably in or you're not. You know,
That's a good point because okay, it's week 14. Where do you need the points? Well, let's look elsewhere where there aren't buys on your team. Jay Jets, Devonta Smith, who knows? AJ Brown could get hurt. Don't tell that to the team that I drafted. And then Brandon Ayuk, 3 studs there. I like the story. There's a story you can tell.
yeah. And I think with this team, you're counting on your four to five stud receivers. You're gonna have 3 receivers in your lineup every week. The 2 starters, or
Yeah,
is it 2 wide receivers or 3 that start?
it's
That's
it's
plus the one
3
flex. Okay,
and a
so
1 flex. So you could have
yeah,
4, but you
yeah,
might be calling into well, with your top 4 you have, they could
yeah,
be at least for your lineup, they should be McLaurin or Ayuk should be hitting your flex every week.
right. And if they're not, I mean, there's a good chance it's because you've got, Singletary has a random 3 touchdown game. Zeke has a big receiving game, or whatever the
Mhm.
story is you want to
Yep.
tell. Gibson's probably a better one for that example, right? Has a big receiving game where, I mean, if you've got Montgomery and Swift hitting your running back, and then you've got all of these dart throws where if they get a touchdown or two, there's a good chance that they could hit your flex, right? And that's the thing about running backs is that, first of all, once they have opportunity, they just run with it, right?
But
If someone
literally,
goes to, right, if someone goes down in front of them,
mhm.
they are the guy. Whereas with receivers, that's not necessarily the case.
Well, look to Tyler Algier. The flipping the board upside down of the percentage of teams who would be dead in the water because they lose Bijan Robinson and the gain on the contingent value that Tyler Algier would give. Because I'm looking at your team, and for your running backs, you can tell so many contingent stories. Where with Montgomery, he's a top 12 running back with Gibbs going down.
Right.
DeAndre Swift, I'm not the biggest fan of, but it
Sure.
looks like he starts off as, at least in the early advance rate weeks, he's going to be a back that you want early on. So he'll fill up points while you're waiting on some of these contingent plays. Chase Brown is getting great buzz. He may end up being a top 12 running back. Devin Singletary will just fill your RB2 spot plenty. All right, just enough, get you through. All right, Devin Motor. Like you said, Ezekiel Elliott could get more touchdown share. We just made the case for Algier. Ramondre Stevenson's out of the way. Maybe it's finally Antonio Gibson. And then you've got differentiated. We talked about sub 1% with Amari DiMercado, Jarrett Patterson, and Amari DiMercado. You might be the only person. It might just be you.
Right. Yeah. And that's the goal, right? And
Yep.
frankly, I went down the list of running backs that I am trying to get into that aren't getting drafted. Where, I mean, Jamal Williams is someone I'd like to start exploring, because Kendra
Uh,
Miller may not be the guy. Cam Akers going to Houston is very intriguing to me, behind Joe Mixon, who's been a workhorse his entire career. But if he
yep.
goes down, are you counting on? Are you counting on Damian Pierce, who can't seem to run the ball anymore?
Here's one for you. I'd like your opinion. What about Miles Sanders? He's not as deep as all of those cuts, but
Oh
he's
yeah,
been really forgotten about.
I think Miles Sanders could be really good in the right offense. I think that with and you're gonna have to forgive me, I forget his name, but the Bucks coach that just went over to the Panthers, um,
Oh, Canales. Yeah.
Canales, yes.
Yep.
I think that I mean you look at what Rashad White did underneath Canales, and you look at what Kenneth
Yep.
Walker did underneath
Hmm.
Canales. I mean, there's a story to be
Yep.
told where the lead back in that system, whoever it is, especially if
Yep.
Brooks isn't ready to go, and if something happens to Hubbard, I think there's a lot of good contingent value there.
And it's funny. I love Chuba Hubbard. We love Jonathan Brooks for his tournament advancing upside. At the same time, you throw enough mud at a wall, something sticks eventually. And for some players, it's there's this lull in our dopamine where Miles Sanders, some years he hits when he's supposed to hit, he doesn't. He goes away, he comes back. We've had a couple iterations where there's been some ups and downs with Miles Sanders. And I feel like this last downward spiral, especially going on a new team, there's just straight fatigue on him. And there's no consideration to, hey, similar to how we ran pure with the Philadelphia Eagles the year they went to the Super Bowl, Miles Sanders, while he's getting older, why can't he put on just one excellent season, especially to your deep cut theory that you have here? And to your point where it's Canales, or maybe it's another team that Miles Sanders could end up on. Now that's all if it's all fiction until,
Sure.
but again, we're telling ourselves stories, so we're having to tell ourselves right now what are not realities, what are fictions. So why don't we just play the hey, Miles Sanders, there's too much, there's not enough room in Carolina. Jonathan Brooks is doing okay. Dallas Cowboys might need a running back. This charcuterie board of Chargers running backs. Maybe it's not working out, and J.K. Dobbins, the optimism was too far. Kamani Vidal is getting outpaced by Jarrett Patterson. So then it's just Gus Edwards. So maybe there's some conjoining there. A lot of ifs and probably two in the weeds for so many people. But your 9 running back build has us inspired here to talk like that. Were there any other running backs that you're thinking of in here that you didn't mention?
Yeah. Let's see if I can find it. But I mean, Kyle Juszczyk, he's going to
Mhm.
have some touchdown equity. And then he must have been taken because I don't see him here. But Justice Hill, like I
Yes.
was talking about earlier, a lot of these players are players that end up on my dynasty teams because of any running back on a 53.
Yep. Yep.
And so, I mean, you're kind of transplanting that theory from dynasty to best ball. And I know
Yes.
it doesn't apply quite as cleanly as it does in lineup, but
Mhm.
there's still, I mean, and I won't say it as elegantly as Scott's guest did. I don't remember his name, but I mean, Sony Michelle could be the difference between like you advancing and not advancing, right? If they randomly get traded and ball out on a new team, you just don't
Yep.
know.
And it's funny the maturation that you have as a fantasy football player, and you used to go from the start your studs mantra, but then you understand that fantasy football is really a weekly game. And it's funny because I remember Matthew Berry would always talk about start your studs, but then I remember there was a development where Matthew Berry would talk about fantasy football is and this is a fundamental concept, is a weekly game. So it is funny. We just think of, hey, those final choppy 3 weeks in our fantasy playoffs, in our best ball tournaments, it's going to be made up of those sexy running backs, those Etiennes, Achans, Bijans, Breeses, CMCs, right? Just name the guys who are up there. We don't think of any of the players where it's like, hey, sure, it's just 1 week, but Ramondre's out and Antonio Gibson is just going to get the rock and he has that 3 touchdown game that we've been begging for. Or, hey, Bijan's been humming along the entire season, might have even gotten you there, but then somebody else has Tyler Algier and it gets them over the top on a build that they have elsewhere. It's very fun to just talk about all these iterations.
For sure. And I mean, you've even got like some pretty well liked running backs like Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Deontay Foreman, um, Miles Sanders, all going undrafted. Even an AJ Dillon. Not that he's well liked, but I mean, there's a world where Marshawn Lloyd does not break out this year, right? And it's just AJ Dillon, as much as we all hate it, right?
Well, how about AJ Dillon falls into the end zone twice, week 16 or 17, and he's
Right.
just one of those weird players who, and like you had said about that smaller portfolio within a larger tournament, sometimes you just want to advance that first week. Maybe AJ Dillon does that for some teams out there, and it just kind of like the Jenga pieces is that piece that moves that alters the entire board in just a way that you just can't predict. I like to talk with about the concept of you're in round 18 and picture what round one has maybe 15 players of a pool that people are drafting. But round 17, round 18, it's not just 24 players. Look at you scrolling down all these players. This is just at the running back position. There's 40, 50, 60, even more on upwards of players who make up these final 2 rounds, and for simplicity's sake, make up that final 18th round.
Right. Yeah. Let's talk about your team. How do you feel? How do you feel coming out of this draft?
It's funny because talking and drafting at the same time, you just don't have your internal dialogue. But it was very fun scrambling in the queue, getting my team up. I've got a 2-6-8-2 build, my 2 onesies where I've committed kind of a best ball sin. It's not quite a sin, but people go against it, which maybe that'll allow me differentiation. Is having 2 quarterbacks from the same game. I think this game could actually shoot out, and I like Hurts and Prescott, and I also like the opportunity to advance because Prescott and Hurts won't be married to a matchup until week 17. And the
Right.
benefit, if I end up getting back or get to the finals, sorry, and even if I don't win the larger or largest prizes, I get into the finals of BBM. Well, I've just been able to pay for maxing out in just the Best Ball Mania tournament next year with
Right.
what they're bringing back. So that's an appeal there. And then my other 2 tight ends, Ferguson and Brock Bowers. I was actually surprised that I went Jake Ferguson, but I had it there to go with Dak Prescott. Where Ferguson was, I just thought, hey, I'll select him, and then maybe I would only be competing with the CD Lamb drafter at that point, which that was earlier towards your wave. So where I had the wraparound, nobody had Dak Prescott to stack. They didn't have any Cowboys. So as I was only having to compete with the Lamb roster, that person wasn't going to get in my way. So I had free reign to go and get myself some Dak Prescott. I have anchor running back. A neat part is Achan Decorum, pick 16 to 129. So I have a huge gap. I love doing that in drafts. And I like my differentiated AJ Brown, Devon Achan. I've been going heavy on AJ Brown, and I've been going heavy on Devon Achan. And I said, you know what? I've had a good discussion with somebody on X about, you know what? Let me get Achan and Brown, and I'll have to go tag them and show them the team that I have because it's like, hey, why don't I just do this crazy concept where I pull up Achan to AJ Brown? Now, I'm glad I was able to do it. I don't think so many people have it. It's not quite near as rare as a Mary DeMercado. The rest of my running backs, Blake Corum, Jalen Wright, I'm applying a strategy. The one thing I like about the same team strategy here is that I'm not conflicting archetypes because Achan's archetype and Wright's archetype, Jalen Wright is going to take on that Mostert archetype in the event that Mostert is out. So I think Achan is unaffected. And then Jalen Wright is the other piece that I love. They can complement each other. And on given weeks, one can advance me, the other, like skipping rocks, through to the finals. Jaleel McLaughlin, Ray Davis, Will Shipley. I really just need at week 6 to get through with some Jaleel and Ray Davis. They just need to put respectable weeks. Probably about week 6, if I look at standings on this team, I'll I'll just be kind of maybe middle of the pack or maybe not move too far. I just don't want to dip down too much that week. If I can get through week 6, I'll be very happy. Will Shipley is unique to go with Hertz and AJ Brown off of my Cowboys exposure. And now I'll rip my receivers, my 8 receivers, and then I want your opinion of your whole breakdown of what you think of my team. I got AJ Brown with Jalen Hurts, DJ Moore, Rashi Rice. Rashi Rice is my 3rd receiver. Some people have him as their 6th receiver, but at the same time, I allocated some of my draft capital early to Chan at running back and Jalen Hurts. So I got a different cost benefit there. Rome Odunze, I really like the fact that I got more in Odunze, even though I don't have Caleb Williams. I'm getting Bear share, all right, to call that back. Jerry Jeudy was a fun one when I was debating going Brandon Cooks. Sometimes we can go too much into a stack with Dak and Cooks and Ferguson. I'm happy that I laid off because now I got a more narrow Dak and Ferguson and not too much game exposure to Philly, Dallas. And now with Judy, I have something unique off of Devon Achan for that week 17 game. Then I've got Jacoby Myers and then 2 receivers that I love. Luke McCaffrey, I've drafted a ton of him. He plays well to the Philly build. And then Andre Yoshivas, I just love clicking him. I've been picking him up in Dynasty. Thank you, Scott Connor, for putting me on to going out and picking and snagging Yoshivas in all formats. So it's a 2-6-8-2 build. What do you think of this team?
Yeah, so I like what you did. The one thing, so we ended up with 2 QBs and 2 tight ends, both in pretty reasonably high ranges. Talk to me about like what compelled you to go and double dip at those positions so early.
So I see it as there's those top 5 quarterbacks, and if you want to click Kyler Murray as one of those quarterbacks, what is Kyler QB7? Joe Burrow's just ahead.
Sure.
So, but if you think of those top 5 elite, it's Lamar, Allen, Hurts, Stroud, Richardson, and Mahomes. I might have said 5 or 6, but there's those core elite, right? To me, with Dak Prescott, it's Dak Prescott, it's Jordan Love, there's a couple others that are out there that are these top quarterbacks where they're just in that money. Jaden Daniels is another one. They're in that money zone where you're not having to pay the premium price. Off the top of my head, Dak Prescott was quarterback 3 last year, and he's being drafted as quarterback 9. See, I'll pull up Dak Prescott on Player Profiler. Yeah, he was QB3, and now you're getting a pretty good discount on Dak Prescott on Underdog. He's disrespected wholly.
Yeah.
I am allocating a lot. To answer your question as well in another way, I like to do these things where I allocate or over allocate in different areas and see if I can bail my team out and find out, well, can I overcome and draft around and build possibilities and outs. One thing that I like, if I had to say a deep layer, finely tooth comb, whatever the saying is, right? With that allocation of the tight ends with Ferguson, Bowers. Also, had I known Bowers would have fallen that late, in retrospect, I would say no Ferguson. But what you know now, what you know then, just would not have even been a reality. But to me, to get Jacoby Myers when I'm trying to play some catch up as my 6 wide receiver, to fall from 119 to 136, that's a bailout there for me.
Yeah.
So that might be that it's subtle, but that might be where I made it up in this draft. And part of that is I left it to fate in the event that the room gave that to me, and maybe they could have squashed that opportunity on me and made me pay for investing heavily at the onesie positions so early.
Yeah. I think I mentioned with the extreme running back build that I've been doing, I have been going kind of what you did here, where I've got, probably both of my onesie positions wrapped up by probably the 8th round.
Yep.
And so I've been kind of I've had some inner conflict where I've been listening to a bunch of, underdog shows, especially on DD, where the cardinal sin is to overinvest on your onesie positions. If you go and get a top 3
Yep.
QB, you should be pushing the other one way down. So that's where I think with my build it kind of went off the rails, because I kind of I didn't stick to my guns on that. I think with my sort of build, I think I need to do more like you did, and go and double tap those more elite positions, and then I get kind of what I was talking about earlier, where my top running backs wouldn't have been as high, and that
Mhm.
might have satisfied some part of me that wants to go get those crusties. The other thing I thought when I was looking at your running back room is I see like one like cut and dry starter, and so I
Yes.
was interested
Yes.
to. There's a lot of upside to be had, but there's also a lot of risk where, if Corum can't wrestle any touches away from
Yep.
Kyron, if the Miami running back room is just too crowded and Jalen Wright doesn't get
Yep.
enough touches, McLaughlin may not even be a Bronco. Like, so talk to me about the idea of like going in on so many rookie running backs. Is that something that, if you were drafting this room again, would you maybe try and get more of a veteran presence, or would you prefer to have that upside rather than hedge your bets?
So there was another draft where I did this in Best Ball Mania, and it was actually with Scott Connor on his show. And I waited running back. My first running back was David Montgomery, like you went in here. But then the rest of the running back room was just filled with a bunch of if sort of players.
Sure.
It might have been Corm, it might have been Benson, and it just I really sit there and think I've locked up one running back, and the depth of what I have the rest of the way,
Could cover the other one.
I do need the pebble. I got to live in reality. I'm looking at the team, and like you say, the archetype. I like to layer my teams. Jaleel McLaughlin is at max a 40% player. I love him. I call him Jaleel the Steal. You
Mm-hmm.
get him so late, but I have to understand the ADP payoff might be like, hey, he's a late single digit round player versus where he is. He's not necessarily a league winner, but he's such an advantage player to have. But he's not going to be like those bell cow running backs. But I love what I'm getting. I feel like I'm getting a baseline with him. So Achan is going to be my moonshot player. McLaughlin's going to get me baseline points. Ray Davis, it still remains to be seen. Shipley, I don't think he'll get much of anything from the jump, although we hear good reports about him, right? I would
Yeah.
love him it's happened before. Barkley's gotten hurt. Jalen Wright, it would be an if. Corum, it would be an if. So there is a lot of if was a fifth scenario to this team. But then to the point of scrolling through the rest of the team, we love the quarterbacks. We
Right.
really like the tight ends. People aren't going to necessarily love Ferguson, but directly tied to Dak Prescott, Ferguson gets better everywhere he goes. So I've turned around on him some. If you see Bowers as elite, I love the wide receivers I have.
Right.
It's really, I'm going to capture gain on the field where I'm flipping the board from my running back room. Like we talked about, your running back room is going to flip the board with so many contingent outs that you have,
Right.
and I can flip the board if these certain running backs get that opportunity share, combined with I know I'm set at quarterback, receiver. I'm very confident at tight end. So now where I need some fate and luck between August 2nd and September, what's the kickoff? 8th, whatever it is.
Something like that.
I need that break, or I need that break along the way where my team, you talk about advance rate. I'll need some of these guys maybe week 3, week 5, whatever that is, where you don't want to fall back too behind. Because one thing I've been trying to do is layer my running back rooms where you're going to fill up archetypes of players. Like, let's say it's Najee, Ramondre Stevenson. You know that Zamir White, you know that they can get you early season for sure and maybe entire season, but their production might just be kind of like this. And
Right.
then the 2 or 3 players behind that could be maybe an archetype of a Chase Brown, a Jaleel McLaughlin, a Tony Pollard, where they don't get the entire lion's share, but they get enough to pop and make some noise. And then I've got layers of players like, if is it Benson, is it Lloyd, is it Corum, who would just be way contingent value, but they need something to happen. So in this instance, wouldn't you say Jalen Wright and Corum, they need something to happen?
Right. Yeah. And I think, and we'll see how it goes with this being my first season of Underdog because it wasn't legal last year for me. With this being my first season, it'll be interesting for me to see just like the feeling of like teams dying off.
Yeah.
I have like if I drafted a team like this, I think I would it would break my heart to like if like you know I mean most of these players are going to make the 53, right? But
Mhm.
if you have like even one of these guys doesn't make the
Yeah.
53 and it's just like your heart's broken, you know.
Yep.
So
Well, here's
that's
one.
where that rookie running backs scare me a little bit for that reason maybe.
How many how much have you drafted any DeAndre Hopkins?
I have. Yes.
So that exercise, it's like it happens everywhere. Every player
Injuries.
that something comes, yeah, Justin Herbert, right? Even if you have one team where you can, oh man, I really hit the nuts on, I waited on Herbert and I got to pair him with Lad. I got DJ Chark late, whatever players that you like. That guy in our draft, he loved Brendan Rice
Right.
so early. But really, if you had that, you're feeling that pain. We're having all those ups and downs. It's really interesting. I think what'll help that is, do you play dynasty and redraft leagues?
Just dynasty. I purged all my redraft leagues. Yeah.
So you at least you have your thing to look at for dynasty. It can distract you some from these best ball teams,
Right.
because some of that powerlessness is you're out of control.
Yeah.
So that's where
Can't
having
you
some
can't
lineup
fix.
leagues. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. All right. Well, thank you for coming on. We'll have to definitely keep track of how this room ends up going. Maybe we'll both advance out of here.
Yeah, and yeah, we can put this in the DD Discord, where we love posting. Check out Destination Devi, all the shows that we have. We've got Dynasty Daddy, who we've linked up with. Ray is always putting out elite goat content. Scott Connor. I'm just more than humbled to be a part of the crew, and I love stuff like this. Engaging with you, and we just got to do a really cool show and so much fun. Best Ball Mania. Like, we could win $1.5 million. We could win our max advance for next year. We could win $50. Okay.
Oh
It's
yeah.
But for what we just did for $25, we did an hour and 20. People spend $25, X amount of beers and then some. So this was thoroughly entertaining, and I appreciate you having me on your show.
Absolutely. I appreciate you coming on.